One of the most important parts of Andor from the beginning up until now has been the way it challenges our thinking about how we interact with the world around us. That when we see things on the screen, it should make us question and think about our own motivations, our own actions, the things we do, the things we say, and the things we believe. And in the most recent arc of Andor Season 2, everything that's been building for a season and a half now comes to a head with the Gorman Massacre and Mon Mothma's speech as a result before the Galactic Senate. But there also is a danger to this because I think everyone wants to put themselves on the side of being the one that's right and their enemies being the one that Mon Mothma is speaking against. So it's very easy to take our own situations and just say, oh, this definitely is talking about the situation in America right now based on my perspective. And I want us to just take a step back from that for a moment and just consider the totality of what this speech really means. And should that mean we change the way that we approach truth in engaging others, particularly on social media? Mon Mothma begins her speech by talking about how she's been a part of the Senate for as long as she can remember.
Fellow senators, friends, colleagues, allies, adversaries, I stand before you this morning with a heavy heart.
I've spent my life in this chamber. I came here as a child. And as I look around me now, I realize I have almost no memories that predate my arrival, and few bonds of affection that cleave so tightly.
Her father, an Arbiter General, her mother, a governor, and Mon Mothma has been a senator for 30 years. So none of her memories even predate what she's saying is her involvement here in the Senate. Now that might be a little bit of hyperbole, but what she's basically saying is I've been here a long time. You know me. You know what I stand for. You know the character that I bring. You know what I fought for. And you're going to hear all these other things said about me now. You're going to have all these other spins about my life and about what I've done and what I haven't done, but you know who I truly am. She's starting her speech by giving the credentials of why they should listen to her, of why her voice should be heard, of why she even can come forward because she is a senior senator, meaning she's been one there longer than most. We even got this sense earlier in the season when they were talking about all of these new senators, these 80 plus senators who have just been brought in probably because they are Palpatine shills, so to speak, and they're just like flooding the Senate with all of these new senators who are more allianced to the Emperor than they are to anything else. And so the boos and the hisses and the cries we hear later as she continues in this speech are most oftenly coming from those loyalists who have not been in the Senate nearly as long as she has. Mon Mothma has established herself as one of those long-time trusted senators, as she tries to say that this credibility should buy you some trust. You should listen to what's going to happen next, especially what's going to happen next.
Through these many years, I believe I have served my constituents honorably and upheld our code of conduct. This chamber is a cauldron of opinions. We've suddenly all had our patience and tempers tested in pursuit of our ideals. Disagree as we might. I am hoping that those of you who know me will vouch for my credibility in the days to come.
Because she knows that the next year plus of time is really going to be crucial for building allies, now public allies, to the rebellion.
I believe we are in crisis.
The distance between what is said
And what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
the death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
What Mon Mothma is describing here in the Star Wars galaxy is very similar to what we've experienced in our own world with the loss of objective truth. This understanding that there is an absolute truth, that there can be a right and a wrong, that not everyone's truth is your truth. Your truth can't just be your truth and my truth be my truth. What happens when you have competing truths that are both making a claim to reality? You can't have both be right. And what she's experiencing here and what has been experienced in the Star Wars galaxy in this conflict is a competing reality, a competing truth. To say that there's a truth that's being told, but this truth does not objectively correspond to reality. It's not real, because objective truth cannot exist in a relative universe. If everything is relative, if everything is based on my perspective and what I think, then there is no real truth any longer. And this is what we've been experiencing for decades in our world. The growing kind of capacity for people just to ignore reality and just go based on what they think is true has been a problem forever. But as things continue to grow and as social media becomes a bigger part of our reality, people can build their own realities that have no grounding in objective truth or absolute truth. And so then we get ridiculous conversations that people are pulling their own facts and their own truth based on their narrow perspective of what they already have agreed to be true or not true. This is similar to what we talked about in the video on Cyril Karn, us not being willing to put our truth claims under the microscope and ask the question, what if we're wrong? Everyone, whether it be Republican, Democrat, or political or non-political, though this feels very political because it's all happening in the Senate, it's happening around kind of a regime lying about what's going on and trying to keep the truth hidden. And it's very easy for people to just apply this to the current regime that they see. But the reality is, all politicians lie. Everyone does what's in their best interest instead of what's in the best interest of the people. But they guide it and hide it and pretend that, our government or our regime or our perspective is the true one while hiding all of the corruption underneath. So this might come off a little bit cynical at all politics, but that's really how I've felt really for these past 10 years. It feels like nothing can be trusted. Nothing is true. And whenever conversation happens on the floor of any assembly, it feels like everyone just brings their curated facts to try and make their argument instead of actually talking about what's really going on in different perspectives. And so everyone twists and spins and moves everything. And as a result of that, no one has the truth. And so in much the same way that Mon Mothma is talking about how this chamber has been kind of had the truth kept out of it, in the same way, I think oftentimes society keeps truth out from the main conversation because all that happens is everyone just shouting their truth louder, and whoever is the loudest sometimes wins.
When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. This chamber's hold on the truth was finally lost on the Gorman Plaza. What took place yesterday, what happened yesterday on Gorman, was unprovoked genocide. Yes, genocide. And that truth has been exiled from this chamber. And the monster screaming the loudest, the monster we've helped create, the monster who will come for us all soon enough, is Emperor Palpatine.
You might disagree, but I believe relativism kills truth. And oftentimes we see it play out that politicians play off of that and use that to their advantage. And depending upon which side of the aisle you are on, you're going to shout that about your opponents. And I think that's what ends up happening even in situations like this, where you might be frustrated at what's going on in the state of the world, or you were frustrated years ago and that's why you voted the way that you did. I think everyone ends up making a claim that the one in power now is hiding the truth, twisting the truth, changing the truth to fit their narrative. And to some degree, that is true. Journalists don't even care about the facts. They just care about the clicks. Whoever can get the story out the fastest, whether it's accurate or not, doesn't matter. They'll print a retraction later that no one else sees. And when you then also throw in the ability for photo editing and AI and everything else, it's harder than ever to know what is actually true. We have clickbait headlines everywhere. Everything is put in a slant to make someone look good and someone else look bad. And even when you might have objective video evidence, people spin everything out of control to be their own version of the truth. It can feel pretty much hopeless to get out of a situation like this. And I think that's the anguish that we see on Mon Mothma's face. She knows there's no other solution because the truth has been exiled. The truth has been put to the side. So who's to blame? We all are. We all are to blame. And I think this is part of the speech that really hit me, this idea of the monster that we've created. Inability to have real discourse with people we disagree with in meaningful, purposeful ways is completely disappeared. And that's our own fault. That's our own fault. We can't blame everyone else about that because we don't actually sit down and have conversations. Now, I'm not saying that if they just got everyone together to have a nice conversation about the differences between the Empire and the Gorman Massacre and everything else going on, that it would be fixed. And I'm not saying it'll just be fixed in our world, but I know for myself, when I come to a situation or something that I believe strongly about, and I know someone who believes strongly the other way, more often than not, the only way we're going to have any positive outcomes from a conversation is to actually sit down face to face and have that conversation. No one's mind is ever changed as the result of an argument. It doesn't go that way. You can't just bring your set of facts to the battle and someone else bring their set of facts to the battle and expect somebody just to win. When we have no humility, when we have no patience, when we have no willingness to find nuance in conversation and recognize that all kinds of things are broken and everyone might have different perspectives how to fix that thing. And if we're not really listening to the perspectives of the other, then we're doing everything a disservice. And ultimately what's lost in the end is truth. And so this is a bit cynical and kind of frustrating video, maybe for you, because I don't necessarily see a great way back, at least not from a global perspective. But if we take a more focused perspective, I think intentional relationships where we have true conversation is the only way we can start to find a real sense of how we get back to a conversation about truth. I don't think it's going to happen on the macro until it really starts happening on the micro. But the problem there is this will cost something. There is a risk involved, just like there's a risk for Mon Mothma to get up front and to call it what it is and to say out loud the quiet things that many people actually already believe and some are on the fence about. There's a great risk that comes with that. In the same way, there is a great risk to stand for truth. There is a great risk to say the truth, especially when it is counter to the culture of the day. And so if there is something that is true and it goes against the mob mentality, there's a risk to speaking that truth. This is partly the frustration with social media and censoring and everything else, that we can't even have real conversations, and I can't even necessarily talk about certain things because YouTube will take things down based on coded language. And so we have to use all these different things to talk about real issues. You saw this even earlier when we were talking about what was happening in Andor Season 2 just a few episodes ago with Bix and the assault, right? We can't even have real conversation because they're so worried about ad revenue. So even platforms like this, where we're going to be able to at least exchange ideas in some way, you in the comments and me here on the video, we have to do it in very censored type of ways, where when you do that face to face, when you have those real conversations, you can actually do that with body language being a part and everything else. So I guess it all comes back to this question for me, and I think this is a question that we all must be asking ourselves. What are you willing to give up to maintain the truth? And I'll share a little bit from myself here to be fully transparent with you, because I think that's only fair. And it's one of those things that I haven't really shared anything about this on the channel, but I'm going to share a little bit just about myself in this way, because I think this kind of shows where I've come from. And again, you might disagree. That's okay. I'm okay if you disagree. But my beliefs growing up, I've grown up and I am a strong, committed Christian, and I've allowed those beliefs to be put under the microscope. For many years, I put those things under the microscope and wrestled back and forth, and I've come to a conclusion that I believe is true. You might still disagree, and we might disagree on all kinds of different things, but the reality is, if we're not willing, and I say this for myself, if I was never willing to allow those deep and hard questions to be asked about what I truly believe, then I cannot confidently stand on that truth. So are we willing to risk being wrong? Are we willing to risk relationship? Are we willing to risk personal, even satisfaction and wealth and all of these things that might come along with putting ourselves out there to speak the truth? I think that's what Andor is kind of putting in front of us. And you can apply that in many different forums. You can apply that to the current regime, as many, I think, have said. But I also think it applies even more broadly than that. It's not just a Democrat and Republican issue, as I think many are trying to make it out to be. I think it's bigger than that. And I think it's wider than that. And I think we have to ask more questions than just that. But as always, those are my thoughts. Would love to hear some of your thoughts down below. What did this speech bring up in you as you're considering your role with the truth, your battle for truth? Are you willing to stand firm on what you believe? Has it been inspected under the microscope? Have you asked the question genuinely, what if I'm wrong? And maybe, what if those that I stand with, what if they're wrong? And maybe we're going to find out that the truth is more in the middle than it is on the extremes. But if we're never willing to have that conversation, if we're never willing to risk ourselves and our own personal comfort, then I don't think we're going to find any path forward. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for being here. As always, my name is Jeremy. This is The Force Fandom. And remember, the Force will be with you always.